Hi, welcome with our first artist talk for the international group exhibition Wide Reflect Sunlight Fuck You Albedo. And our first guest is artisan scientist Lindsey Nicholson that I will shortly introduce in a second. Just would like to mention that, hi Lindsey. Just to mention that you can ask questions in the comments below, and we will then check them meanwhile, and there will be a space for this at the end of the talk. And before introducing our first guest, I will just tell that this exhibition is international group exhibition about consequences of human behavior toward nature, especially, and what are we facing right now, and about this albedo, especially effect that is the part of the main title, is one of the tipping points, and the more we will hear today, fortunately, from Lindsey. And Lindsey is currently studying for her master in art and science at the University of Applied Art in Vienna, and is also an assistant professor at the University of Innsbruck. And her artistic work is motivated by exploring uncomfortable dualities and experiences and choices related to societal developments around nature and technology. And her scientific research is focused on unraveling the connections between climate conditions and glaciers, and her scientific teaching on training students to be curious, confident, climate literate members of society, from her own words. So hi, Lindsey.
Hi.
And now if you could tell us something more about the albedo first, if we can start like this.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting for me to be part of this show because it's really like a good fusing of some of the work I do. So just to give a little bit of an introduction to this albedo feedback effect that you just mentioned as a tipping point. I think in the news, many people have seen that it's often reported how much the Arctic sea ice is retreating. And it's reduced by more or less half in the last 50 decades. 5 decades rather, sorry, in the last 50 years. And this has a really profound effect because when the ocean, the Arctic Ocean, is covered by a cap of ice, then first it's super bright, this albedo effect. So it reflects maybe 50% to 70% of the incoming solar radiation. And when it's gone, the ocean water is super dark and reflects maybe only about 7%. So what this means is so much more of the solar radiation is possible to be absorbed by the water surface than would be absorbed by the sea ice. And so it makes a big difference to the temperature, the amount of energy and the temperature of that region, and then also to the globe. And the thing is that once it's a feedback, because once it starts melting and the sea ice is retreating, then more and more of the sunshine can be absorbed by the ocean. And so it warms up more and then it melts more. And so it becomes a kind of runaway vicious cycle. And at the moment, it's predicted more or less that the ocean, the Arctic Ocean in summer will be ice-free by about 2030 or 2035. And so that's super soon that this massive change is going to happen. Yeah. So it's a really amazing change that we're going to somehow see in our lifetime. And this, in fact, not just our lifetime, really soon. Yeah. So this is, I think, the key aspects of this albedo feedback and how it changes the amount of energy and therefore how warm the planet is. And the cool thing, or the interesting thing about the Arctic, is that it affects the Arctic area itself, but also on a global scale. So it losing the sea ice that's been lost now is kind of equivalent for an extra 25% of the carbon dioxide forcing that's been going on over the last 40 years. So it really compounds the overall effect.
Okay. Yeah, this is insane. The years that like we will reach this tipping point, but maybe you can tell us more about like how are we like what is the human impact on this effect, like on this
Yeah, so it's pretty much thought that it's really driven by just the changing greenhouse gas contributions. So this is like how we impact and drive this effect. But I think that the knock-on results and then how we are in turn influenced by it is really like much more complicated. There's a real like cascade of effects, because once we warm the Arctic and lose the sea ice, there's loads of like ecological impacts. It really affects pretty much all the Arctic ecosystems have evolved to with the sea ice being there, right? And so they need it, and so do the human societies that live in the Arctic. They're dependent on it for travel and for like understanding where and how they can catch their food and so on. But I think the main way that like we both impact and are affected by it is in this global change. You know, we drive this by changing the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and then it comes back to affect us by changing the total atmospheric temperature. So changing the heating of our planet, like wherever you live. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic.
Yeah, it's a bit of a instant karma, at least.
Yeah, somehow. And you're right, it's crazy. The timescales are really interesting. Like only a few decades ago, like scientists were thinking this would happen like maybe 30 years later. And the newest predictions are, yeah, like as soon as 10 years time. 10 or 15, yeah.
So can you tell that we already like reached this tipping point where it can be like in any way fixed or slowed down at least?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm not totally sure. I think the studies at the moment, that the latest studies I've read are hinting that we've crossed the tipping point already. But that's quite I don't know, like I think that's quite a difficult thing to say. It's one of the focuses of active research, I would say, at the moment. Okay. And the thing is that if I can step to the kind of piece I created, it's really inspired by this question of like, is there something we can do about this specifically? Because maybe I can speak now a couple of words about what inspired this because it's inspired by an ongoing project to directly oppose this effect, this loss of the high reflectivity of the sea ice. So there's an idea to use a kind of geoengineering solution, make these tiny little balls of glass, basically, so made of sand, and cover the sea ice with them, because that makes it brighter and then it reflects more sunlight, and it kind of therefore protects it, because when the sea ice is melting, it kind of gets wet and dark and bluish and absorbs more sunlight and then melts faster. So yeah, there are some things we can do. Like obviously, I think it's if we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, that has an effect on the future pathway. But how much it will affect the future of Arctic sea ice, I'm actually not too sure about. I'd have to look that up. But certainly there are like direct actions that we can try in terms of engineering solutions.
But what about these like production of these samples? Like doesn't the energy to create these things and like natural resources and everything, doesn't it even outweigh then again like the
I know. I don't have an answer, and I looked at their website, and this is exactly the kind of thing that I think grabs me about these ideas, because it's so difficult to know if it's what its net effect is. at the moment, like the scientists are researching this idea, and if it like has a negative effect on the wildlife and how much it works and how effective it is. But in doing so, they're of course like traveling around and producing test sites, and time is passing, and all this activity also has a kind of carbon footprint, as would producing them at scale. So no doubt, like looking at that production and what would be the impact of it has got to be part of their solution. But it's also just like a real, it's kind of a real human conundrum. And I think it's why it's so confusing for most people. And I mean, I work in this kind of topic, and it's super confusing for me to think about like what's right, you know, like, and I've read quite a bit about geoengineering, and I find it really hard to judge when something's like an all-out win, or it has quite a heavy cost associated. And the reason why this project like really grabs me, I'd read about it before this, before becoming involved in the show, but it had been kind of like eating away at the back of my mind, like, is this good or is this stupid? And you know, like if the option of my opinion was like really between this is kind of crazy and a complete like waste of time and not tackling the real problem, all the way over to actually maybe this is really smart and we should go for it all out. And why isn't this being, you know, why isn't this a much bigger deal? Why isn't it funded by governments? Why isn't it happening? And the thing that's so challenging, and it felt like a kind of illustration to the problem that we all have just now, is those two opinions are really far apart, and like somehow the reality could be anywhere in between. And how do I choose, or how do I understand what the right thing is? And I think my sense is that both individually and as a society, we're kind of crippled by this lack of like, what should we, you know, lack of clarity of what do we do. Like, I think lots of people know there's somehow a problem, but what do we do?
Yeah, that's very true, and it's I can imagine also hard to like decide on the possible solutions. But before we get to more of art and your approach, are there any like other solutions right now in the like debate that might indicate like some actual like changes in solving the process?
Yeah, I mean, actually, when it comes to sort of like preventing breakup of the sea ice, and this project is the only one I know that's kind of like directly tackling that. There are other kind of geoengineering solutions involved with doing something that's called seeding clouds, so like making fake or triggering the formation of high elevation clouds that also kind of reflect sunlight away. Basically like just reducing the input of energy then in this case. But in terms of like the changes that are happening to the Arctic sea ice, I think it's definitely entered the stage of like positive feedback. And you can really see this in the kind of trend of how it's really decreasing more and more over time. So I think I'm not misrepresenting the science when I say that like it's very expected that the sea ice will be lost, even if we take action to reduce carbon dioxide emissions just now. I think we're on that path without a way out.
Okay, and in that case, because the exhibition is sort of like focused on these like alternative materials and lots of work with bacteria and fungus and experimentation of what it is like dark, warm, no light kind of world that we are like leading to might be, and what good we can like take out of it if we just redefine our like valuing categories a bit. because usually it has these like very negative connotations, like
Yeah.
fungi and stuff. It's just like disgusting, but it's actually like super cool even.
But
Like,
yeah, it's interesting because like I'm not sure what's expected for the like the biological systems in the Arctic Ocean, because it's going to fundamentally change the landscape for all the sea life when you don't have a cap. And I don't know too much what's expected for the you know, the basic plankton and sea life there, but it's got to be, I think, quite good news for some aspects of the ecological system, and probably these lower aspects that we admire less, see less. We know that it's kind of problematic for polar bears, this like iconic sign, but maybe there's good news in here for different organisms, that's for sure.
there's also an interesting approach that it might like benefit some new kinds. But okay, let's finally get to the art, because it's artist talk and we are not only scientists but also an artist. And I would be very interested in because you are like first scientist, let's say, or that was like the main first approach. Like, how did you get to art, or why did you felt like you want to expand your artist or your scientific research through artistic mediums?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. I think that it was really like a kind of gut feeling, a sort of dissatisfaction with how to deal with some of the challenges through science. I'm, as you're right, like I'm a scientist primarily, and I do think that science offers us quite a lot of answers and useful information. Well, rather, let's just say, take that back. Useful information, but not always obviously answers. You know, I just said this thing, like, how do we make decisions? How do we take like ownership of decisions, and how do we navigate like this kind of complex landscape? And I think I was feeling broadly like increasingly frustrated with in some sense, why are we continuing to do more research? Now, like my science colleagues will probably shoot me down for this, because obviously it's kind of useful to know with more detail or greater detail, but I'm kind of interested in what are the solutions? How can we move forward? How can we activate people? And a huge challenge is like, we need to sort of act collectively. And science is often, although it happens in a kind of soup of information, it's kind of quite like a little lonely individual endeavor. And I don't think it's not an emotive task. It's not something that takes people with you. I don't think people get excited or moved by science. And I think the only way that we can move together is to be, I don't know, collectively excited or enthused about something. And I guess selfishly, I started kind of doing some more exploration into the area of art because of a need to express myself in a freer way than science offers. Like, I think science is creative, but it's really bounded, right? Like there's rules. And I think part of the problem just now is the kind of societal boundaries or system that we're living in isn't working for us right now. You know, we need to think differently. And I feel like what's offered by exploring the same issues artistically is then much more open and flexible, and we know something different is needed. And like art, I see art as a really fertile ground for really different approaches.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. So do you see it that it's not only about like getting the scientific research closer to people through art, but also that science like this creative thinking and creative approach in the research itself, maybe?
Yeah, perfectly interpreted. Like my experience is that I'm actually, and this is possibly a reflection on myself, you know, not like the whole community of scientists or scientific methods, but like I think I'm both more creative and actually more critical when I'm sort of thinking about something in a more artistic way or approaching it in a more artistic way. I'm looser with my mind, possibly because I'm maybe doing a bit more with my hands as well. But like, yeah, I think it's just a big difference to being slightly indoctrinated by information within this sphere of science and actually asking looser questions and questioning some of those. Yeah, in fact, it sounds strange because science should be and is about questioning already. But I just feel that the reality of being a working scientist is much more constrained than this ideal vision of what it is. So we try and follow this pathway to ask good questions. But yeah, I feel my mind is freer if I'm trying to approach it from an artistic way. And I think it's sometimes also quite interesting to look at a problem from both ways at once, which I guess is how people used to experience all of life. It's only relatively recent that these are sort of thought of as two different things.
Yeah,
like
that's very true that like the further we go, more dissect it is like everything. So maybe not only like art will benefit from scientists coming into the art field, but maybe like research field should open itself for artists maybe more to embrace the more creative and critical thinking. But we have a first question, and it is, what is art role in making an awareness and bringing in change? Isn't it too late for art as first step taker, innovative role, to even do anything, as we actually need an action now?
Yeah, okay, so the question's kind of like how long it takes to make a response. I totally agree with the point that action is needed now. And my personal view is that we need all the action now. You know, like I'm not interested in putting judgment on how the best way to take action is. I think any action is better than none, but there's also like a lot to be thought about in terms of what's best. And I think that's what my kind of piece was, exploring my own like indecision about what's best. But I don't think it's like too late for art. I mean, I guess this is interesting because, as I say, like I feel like a bit uncomfortable even talking about myself in the role of an artist. But I think it has a profound effect, like on me personally, how I see these problems and how I tackle them and how I take my understanding back into my research and teaching. But I also just think that it can never be too late for art to start to have an impact, because I think that for people to either try and take action to change or get excited about some new reality and take an opportunity of a new changed world, both still need in some way like a positive vision of the future. I feel like we're crippled by fear just now, and like our society and political environment, like fear is like the engine just now. And I think it's not helpful. It's incapacitating us. And so I think like here, art and the imagination and the vision that can be presented by like artistic exploration, I think is a key way of not just giving hope. That sounds a bit soft, but like just scraping out this negativity and creating it, replacing it with maybe excitement of like what the future might hold. Maybe it's going to be scary, maybe it's going to be challenging, but like it is what's lying ahead, and it's hopeless. It's rubbish to be kind of worried about it. Like we have to meet it and get stuck in with it. And I feel like, to me, yeah, like exploring things through an artistic way allows that space for that excitement, which I think is important.
Yeah, I think this is great approach. I really love this, which we also like tackled. I think thanks Urte for this question. That we also tackled this this relationship between art and science already. But maybe if there is something else that you might want to like share or add to this relationship between the two, like is there maybe a way where you being also an artist impacts already like the way you look into your research, or like has it changed, for example, since you started like doing art?
So honestly, I think it hasn't changed my research yet, but I think it will. I've been studying now for a year, and I think before then I was really just dabbling and not taking seriously my interest in approaching things from a different way, or having at least kind of two approaches to use. I'm sure it's affected my teaching already and how I express what I know and what I want to choose to explain to students and what I want to give them to explore. My experience also of studying at the University of Applied Art is quite an interesting one, which probably is not to do with being an artist, but it's profoundly interesting for me to see a university, like work in a university which like pursuing scientific research and scientific teaching, and then also at the same time be a student myself in a rather different university. And I think that there's a big difference in terms of the openness and innovation and breadth of questions and discussion that happens at the Academy of Applied Art. The discussion tends to be narrower in my scientific university sphere. And I think this is also, it's an interesting reflection I've had from this experience. Yeah, but I'm sure that my experiences and the path I've sort of started on now, like pursuing more artistic exploration of my personal experiences and perhaps some bigger ideas that are going on in society, I'm sure that will come back into my research. It's just a bit early just now, I think, to say how, and I can't draw out a particular example. But I think it will change the way I do things.
And do you maybe, like, have you already seen that it would affect your students already, like this this approach you are bringing from your art studies, for example, like in shaping their more creative and critical thinking?
I hope so, but it's difficult when you're a teacher to like judge if it's having an impact yet. Yeah, I hope so.
Do they know that you also study art and you are artist?
Some, but like I definitely don't label. They know I'm studying, I think, but that as I say, I still feel a little bit, as yet, I feel a bit immature on this path of exploring art to feel like calling myself an artist. But that's going to change, I think, slowly as well.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm really excited about occupying this dual space, like being able to switch between and also be able to like bring them together and sometimes look at some issues really from both. or just like have that kind of, at a personal scale, the mental flexibility to jump from one to the other. And yeah, I'm very confident that that helps me just as a human, but obviously the limits of me being helped, the onward impact of that is small. Yeah.
Yeah, we have another question actually, and it is exactly about this this art and science relationship. So, how often artists mix art and science, and do you think it is always a positive effect? Can it lead to some extent to misinterpretation of scientific research? This is super interesting. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. So I think there's a huge movement to try and mix these activities. Is what I've seen as a sort of scientist. Like there's many like scientific activities where they have like an artist in residence. And I think like my artist colleagues and friends would have more input on this actually, because they have like direct experience of what that is. And I think at the moment we're still at a case where the scientists sometimes expect that what they're going to get is a really nice picture representing their science, like a and I think the most fruitful relationships are obviously not that, because that's not what the artists are wanting to do. So I think that there aren't really negative consequences or potentials. I mean, if there's really a fruitful relationship working together, then the very point is that it won't be misinterpreted. And maybe like an artist will be interested in something that's not the main message or doesn't seem the most interesting thing to the scientist, but that's fine. You know, like it still exposes a different aspect or dimension to the topic or the way of working, I think. I can imagine there might be some disappointment in like collaborations if they're not quite what was expected, but I don't know. I think the people who tend to like step into these kind of collaborations are already consciously or subconsciously like ready for it, right? They're interested and open, and then I think it works mainly. So I think it's always a positive effect, but it may be an unexpected positive effect.
Mm-hmm. And maybe with I don't know, like some artist who is not scientist and is not collaborating, but just appropriating some scientific facts or like some research that they found online, for example. That was interesting. Like, have you maybe saw something that was already misinterpreted, or like, I mean, you can also find a lot of so-called scientific facts that
Yeah.
doesn't stand for much. So maybe also this was I mean, I can't really tell what was the question behind.
Yeah, like, no, I know what you mean. I can't think of an example myself of when I've thought, oh yeah, but this like an artistic work has been inspired by a scientific concept or idea, but actually misinterpreted it. But actually, to be honest, I sometimes think that maybe there's something really interesting in the misinterpretation, as long as it's not trying to, you know, like I think poor representation of science in journalism is much more damaging than like than an artistic misrepresentation, because it's sold as the information. Because an artistic like misrepresentation might even be considered like I don't know, uncovering something cool or something new or something about how people outside of the field like really see it working, how people think it works, even if it's not, you know, which is also actually a really interesting like point of communication or disconnection between maybe what scientists are doing and producing and how it's experienced by the rest of the world.
Yeah, so from your experience, maybe like some disappointed or like angry scientist looking down on art, or like critiquing on like, oh, this is not true, or like, oh my God, they misunderstood completely, or like, you know, like,
yeah, maybe, but I think that would only happen in the kind of case where you said, you know, like somebody kind of finds their own information. And I don't think that scientists and artists can't communicate to the degree that, like, in a conversation things aren't clear. And I would also say that by my very brief look into it, which really is very inexperienced, but allow me please to say it anyway, I think that when a collaboration is instigated more from an artist's side, I think it's I think this sometimes leads more to interesting things and to the crux of a problem, or like it digs a more interesting pathway into the problem. And I think that might be because sometimes if initiated from a science side, it may be more perceived as, instead of real work or exposing a new side of the problem, like it's seen as an outreach activity. So an add-on, a sideline, a communication to the public thing. And I think that when artists, my second-hand but experience is that when artists connect or approach to scientists for to work with them or to explore a topic together, they're really like co-exploring something, or the artist is doing their own investigation. It's not just like a reproducing through a different lens. It's really looking at it differently. And so in that respect, it's yeah, it can really, I think, uncover deeper things. Yeah.
And can you like imagine, or does it happen sometimes? Because I can imagine an artist wanting to approach some scientific facts or some phenomena and calling in for collaboration with scientists. Can it happen like the other way around, like a scientist or group of scientists would be like, okay, we have this issue and we would like more creative outlook on it, so let's invite some artists to maybe get some different input?
I hope that's coming. I think it is coming. I think we're right on the cusp of that. But I think most working scientists now would never think of doing that. And it would also, there wouldn't be any money for it. There wouldn't be time for it. There'd all these like practical blockages. But I think it's happening. Like, I've never been part of it, but yeah, I mean, I think there, even in the last year when I've started looking, there are quite a few kind of calls to participate in activities or workshops or residencies to focus on things which are specific topics which are trying to bring people together across disciplines. And I mean, I think there are lots of artists, like materials, fabrics artists, that are making like innovative new materials that they're progressing at least as fast as the engineering scientists who are making new materials. They may be looking at for different reasons or purposes, but yeah, I have high hopes for that as fertile ground in the future. Yeah, I want that to happen.
And we have another question now, a bit like to this topic. Are there existing channels on how ideas brought up through art can reach research field?
Oh, wow. I don't know, because I imagine that's different depending on like different fields. I think, like, honestly, my experience is most working research scientists at a university are all reachable. Like, I mean, you can send them an email and they'll probably answer, or pick up the phone and they'll probably talk to you about something. So I think there's not blockages, but I think that this question is more like about if some of the big debates and questions brought up in the field of art, like, are seen and approached also by science, and that I'm not sure about. I think it would be I think it would be a really profitable crossover. Likewise, where you were talking about like do scientists ask artists in to help them solve problems? I think that would be good. And I also think here, for example, like actually establishing and opening those channels where some of the key ideas or developments going on in certain parts of the art world can be approached or incorporated or challenge some of the scientific views would also be good. I'm just not aware of like there being like structural formal channels to facilitate that.
Okay, yeah, because like I can see artists like going online and going through like scientific publications and research and search to like back up their artwork with like a proper data. But I have to say it's kind of hard to imagine like scientists going like, okay, we have this like a problem and topic, and maybe there was some art made about it.
I agree.
Great on the other hand.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think it's rarely that it's looked at the other way, but I don't think that like scientists are closed-minded though. I think they'd be open to that. It's kind of like culturally not done. Artists are great like gatherers of ideas, right? And look around, and scientists also look, but I think we've become a little bit like we look at at data only, and maybe this is restrictive just now. Maybe I'm also just talking about myself and my own experience of that, but I'm aware I don't want to represent like a whole group of people, but yeah, I think somehow there isn't quite parity in the respect of the two disciplines. Like I think artists have interest and do a lot of like work sometimes to explore and understand and take on board tons of scientific information, which is really like an uphill battle if you you know, you're coming from no background. You have to invest a lot to do it, and like in return, I kind of feel that generally there's a lot of, I don't think very many working scientists look to the activities of artists for their inspiration. Not to say that they might not be inspired by seeing artists' work, but yeah, it's not like considered as a kind of a resource, like a way of taking on board this thinking, which I personally think is a shame. Yeah.
So would you encourage artists to reach out more, maybe to scientific groups? Or
yeah, and I also try to, obviously initially only as a very kind of one-to-one point, like talk about my experience as a scientist and how I've profited like from a closer connection to exploring like issues, closer connection with an artistic community, and also exploring ideas from an artistic perspective. Like I think it's yeah, I think it's valuable, and it's inspiring in the way that like I can work myself, not just at a larger scale. Yeah.
And we've been talking a lot about scientific field and their like relationship with arts and culture, but is art field inclusive toward scientists or people from more scientific background, like to like take their art, for example, or their input to art seriously? Because it can go both ways, like, let's be honest about.
Yeah, I think my, again, limited experience, but I think any kind of exclusion I feel is something that I do to myself, and I don't feel much, right? You know, it's like even in this talk, I've said, oh, I've struggled to talk about my art or myself as an artist. This is something I'm doing to myself. Nobody's putting that on me, and I think that my experiences of talking about artistic process or experience with working artists who I've encountered from doing my studies is that they are wholeheartedly open in talking about what their experience is and wholeheartedly interested in hearing any feedback from anybody else, whatever the background. That's my experience, but it's a personal one. So I've not had that. Yeah.
Then it's great. I hope only better and better experiences will follow. Is there maybe something that you would like what would you personally feel like help to feel more like an artist, like to have this this daring to call yourself an artist?
Yeah, I think it's just time in my case, and keeping doing, because I'm aware that I mean, both fields have like, you know, established sort of like metrics of success and ways that you're judged as like, okay, you've managed. But if I think about the line I'm walking between the two, these things are irrelevant. It's about how I'm operating. So to me, as long as I'm digging deep into something in one way or another, I'm quite happy with that. That situation. But I think it's just time. It's like a new activity for me. It's like if you I don't know, you start a new job or a new sport, it feels a little bit uncomfortable until you feel like, yeah, okay, I do that as well. Yeah, I think it's time.
Yeah, that's true. Then hopefully you will stay with it. And for this, we have a nice question that we will also reaching the end in a while, that we can maybe wrap it up with this. What is your current or next artistic project, and how it will be related to science, if it will? Because it, of course, doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So I think at the moment I'm actually working on, I'm continuing some ideas about like exploring albedo and change, because one of the things that was super interesting about being involved in this show is like I, you know, my interpretation or my approach was like very literal, just because something very literal was in my mind and niggling away at me. But like, I think that I'm looking at these kind of like darker, steamier, more humid, like alternatives, and what different like kind of eco futures might hold. Because I think in the public eye there's a lot of like very digital and mechanized and advanced technology futures represented, but I'm thinking that that's not the kind of, or if we have that, it can't be just that. It's just not really sustainable. So there's got to be, I'm kind of interested in digging into like, yeah, greener futures and sort of how we will couple our experiences more with like ecological systems. So what I'm doing artistically just now is very little, I guess, like it's just playing with mediums of paints and drawings. But what I'm reading about is ecology and like new ecology theory, which is different to the scientific research I'm doing, but it's still kind of it's scientific, you know, like everybody else, like every other sort of like artist who's looking for science for inspiration. I'm reading about microbes or something that I don't know anything about. Even if I'm a scientist, it's not my part of science. So yeah.
And do you think it's important to also like be ecological in using the mediums, for example, like
yeah,
within the art? And
yeah, I mean, this is super tough and affects both of my activities, because obviously, ideally, yeah, for sure, like we should be being consistent, and if ecological concerns are part of the thing that's being explored, it doesn't have to be that like everything you do is very sustainable, but if it's not, then it should be part of the point, I think, of the activity. And like scientific, I don't know, like to be honest, I just feel like in my life, I'm trying to do as many things as possible to be as sustainable as possible. And there's always going to be compromises, and you can call them compromises or you can call them failures. But I mean, that's one of the things that, I'll be honest, I do struggle with. I laugh about the fact that, like, when you go to sort of some old galleries, you always see where people, like famous artists, they painted on the back of all their boards and canvases. And in these cases, it's always portrayed as they did it because they're like, you know, some starving artist who can't afford any more wooden board. And me, like, I really hesitate to try and produce big things at the moment because I think they might fail. And then I've used a lot of stuff to make something that I'm like, oh no, bonfire, you know, like I don't really, I definitely experience that as a blockage because of trying to not waste things. So I guess I hope somehow in the future I can find a way to navigate a way through that and explore also maybe some bigger things as an artist for that reason. Yeah.
And what do you think maybe of this? This is kind of a huge topic now, like data usage, and this all like servers are like even worse than anything. And we've been also like very like trying to be considerate about it with also creating this exhibition. And because of the COVID restrictions, we had to put like everything online. So it was a bit of a struggle to approach this kind of topic through something so like damaging, basically. Like, what do you think of like how to maybe approach this, or how to?
Yeah, I think it's a really big issue, and it needs to come up to the, you know, it needs to come to the fore. My feeling is that it's not just me, but I feel like it's the general like public, that because our digital lives are so like intangible, we think they're not consumptive, right? Like we think they don't, every picture we take on our phone, and it's like every person who has one of these takes loads of photos. They're all using kind of energy to be stored. And it might be still small compared to some other like activities, but it's cumulative. If everybody's doing it, like it's a lot. And I guess this is an interesting thing where I think technology can help itself, because I guess like an answer, for example, to the issue of how much data is being stored, let's say maybe even pointlessly, is that you really like have limits, or things dissolve after time. Like we want them to be permanent, but maybe that's something we have to just leave behind and say, nah, it was fine, like as it was, as a short-term existence. I don't know. I really just think though that these things need to be talked about, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we keep digitally that's obsolete. And of course, like some data companies have an interest in keeping this for their research. But I think, yeah, if we're gonna use our digital world to keep like permanent, semi-permanent records of things, then I think we need to think about what we want to hang on to and not. No.
Yeah, do you think maybe there is just like more awareness needed? Because like if we take things like, I don't know, recycling, for example, or like this material-wise, more like analog kind of like life, it's still like kind of bad, I would say, but we are getting to these habits of separating materials and more thinking like when grocery shopping about the packaging, or like the carbon footprint of the like country where it comes from. But I wouldn't say like I personally don't like really forgetting about thinking about these, like more like this mindfulness in approach within like digital, especially as media artists. So do you think maybe there is also a way for art to overtake for this like awareness about it and to maybe like critique itself a bit?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it will, and like art's the thing that will do that, I think, like raise the awareness and like bring this realization, because I think you're dead right to look at like how do we deal with materials and how long it took like society to actually start thinking about like where does the garbage go? Like once we remove it so it's not in our backyard, no, it's gone. And like digital consumption is even harder to make tangible. And I'm impatient for people to, or for us, society, me as well, I'm part of it, you know, to get to grips with this and understand what some solutions might be. But like, look how long it took people to really like respond to, say, for example, how we're going to tackle dealing with the amount of plastic we're generating. I mean, there was knowledge that this is a problem, and it just took a really long time to reach kind of critical mass of some action. And I think we're kind of in a place where there's action now, but there's still tons and tons of plastic being produced and used and discarded. We've reached awareness, but we haven't, or at least in parts of the world, we've reached awareness and not converted to action yet. So I think with a lot of these issues, we need to start learning, we need to kind of find a way to be quicker, to like get realization, and then from there to change. And I can only think that the speed of uptake of change seems to me really important to do something collective. And this is for me where I think like the ways that things can be communicated or expressed or brought to people's awareness through art has much more potential to have a shared response, because it's kind of I don't know if it's right to say it's an emotional response. It's an innate human response to art, in a way that like science and facts kind of can't like reach us in the same way. I'm not saying that art isn't representing facts, but you know, like I mean a list of facts. People don't share an experience like that. And I think when we have to all act together, I think it's really important to have a sense that we all, have a shared reaction or response. And I think in this way, I find the hope for artistic outputs to be able to do that more likely. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very nice that we ended with this sort of call for action.
Yeah.
Final answer. If in case you want to add something now, because we will have to end soon.
Yeah, no, I'm just really thankful for the opportunity to talk about it. And thanks really for your questions. They're really insightful. I appreciate them.
Thank you very much. We are very happy to have you in the exhibition and also for this talk. It was super amazing, and thanks everyone else also for the questions. And now we will end, and hopefully you will join us also for next artist talk that we will have in a couple of days again. And stay tuned into our social media channels, and you can either, if you have a significant reason to walk past Rheindorfgasse 42, where our gallery is, then you can see it through as a window display, or you can go online and use some more data on in a VR version of the exhibition link you can find and in Instagram bio of Improper Walls, and also on our website. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time.